You know there's a new Fast and Furious movie coming up when you see theories brewing left and right, and this video covers just that. The Fast and Furious update makes Rock's return more important but less likely. Along with that, Fast X has to get rid of one character for Jason Momoa's villain to work. So watch this video till the very end to learn all about it. Starting with, will The Rock return? Okay, so the latest movie update means that The Rock's return in the Fast and Furious universe is even more unlikely, even though it's the most important thing that could happen in the movie. In a recent interview, the movie's producer Kelly McCormick revealed that the sequel to the 2019's Hobbs and Shaw isn't in development, so it won't happen as soon as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's schedule clears off. Sorry to be the bearer of the bad news, but it looks like it's unlikely that we'll see Luke Hobbs return to the Fast and Furious franchise, which is a real bummer for fans of the series. He appeared lastly in The Fate of the Furious, but there were hints at the end of Hobbs and Shaw, even though there was still more story to be told with him and Deckard Shaw. However, it seems less and less likely that we'll get to see any more of their adventures. In the movie Hobbs and Shaw, both Ryan Reynolds and Rob Delaney made cameos, which hinted at the possibility of more spy work for the characters. The filmmakers intentionally included these cameos, suggesting that there was more story to be told in the franchise. But, as we mentioned earlier, it seems unlikely that we'll get to see any more of these adventures. Moving on, the saga needs The Rock back. As the producer said, there won't be a Hobbs and Shaw sequel until and unless Dwayne has a clear schedule. So that ultimately means that the main saga needs The Rock back, as Luke Hobbs was just another antagonist for Toretto's crew. Even though the character on its own was nothing more than a typical government spy who was supposed to bring out the criminals and spread justice, he's appeared in 4 movies of the series. This has made him an important part of the franchise. His involvement has changed the franchise, and he's essential to Fast 6 and 7 plots. So, the filmmakers of the Fast and Furious franchise have done a good job of developing and fleshing out the character of Luke Hobbs, giving him a fully formed backstory. This can help make Hobbs a more well-rounded and relatable character. If McCormick's update is accurate, the character of Hobbs will no longer be a part of the Fast and Furious franchise. This would mean that he will not appear in any future installments of the series. It's always possible that the situation could change in the future, but as of now, Hobbs will not be returning. Following up, if there's no sequel, then what? It's not uncommon for the main characters to come and go in a film franchise, and the Fast and Furious series is no exception. If there is no Hobbs and Shaw 2 and the character of Hobbs does not return to the main saga, the franchise may bring back other characters or introduce new ones to fill the void. It's also possible that the filmmakers could choose to focus on the existing characters and their storylines. Without knowing more about the specific plans for the franchise, it's difficult to say for sure what the future holds. However, it's always exciting to see what new stories and characters will be a part of the film series that we love. Usually, the final installment of a movie series brings together all the elements and characters that are introduced throughout the series, and it sounds like the Fast and Furious might be no exception, with the confirmation that both John Cena and Charlize Theron will be returning to Jacob Toretto and Cypher respectively. It seems likely that the government will play a role in the story. It's also possible that the film will involve a globe-trotting adventure, given the series' history of high-stakes international action. Without knowing more about the specific plot of the film, it's difficult to say for sure what we can expect. However, it's always exciting to see how a film series will wrap up and bring its storylines to a close. Coming up, Hobbs' absence would be shocking. Based on everything that we've described, it seems like the character of Hobbs might play a significant role in the events of the upcoming Fast and Furious film. If this is the case, his absence from the film could be surprising to audiences and potentially jarring to the continuity of the story. However, it sounds like the likelihood of Hobbs returning to the franchise is uncertain. It's always possible that the situation could change and Hobbs could appear in the future, but as of now, his return is uncertain, not to mention the Johnson-Diesel conflict. We often see conflicts arise on film sets, and it sounds like the Fast and Furious franchise was no exception. The feud between Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel has been well documented and played a role in Johnson's decision not to return for The Fate of the Furious. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Johnson cited fundamental differences between the two actors as the reason for his departure from the main franchise. However, Johnson could continue portraying his character Luke Hobbs in the spin-off film Hobbs and Shaw. It's always a shame when conflicts arise, but it's important for the people involved to do what they feel is best for themselves and their careers. It's always a possibility that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson could decide to return to the Fast and Furious franchise. Regardless of any past conflicts or issues, if he were to return to the main saga, it might mean the end of plans for a Hobbs and Shaw 2. It's also possible that the filmmakers could incorporate both the main saga and a Hobbs and Shaw sequel into their plans. Ultimately, the decision to return to the franchise would be up to Johnson. It's difficult to say for sure what he might choose to do. It's important to remember that he is a talented actor and has many other opportunities available to him, so he will have to weigh all of his options before deciding. Next up, Fast X has to get rid of one character. The Fast and Furious franchise has a history of adding major action stars to its its cast, often in villainous roles. If Jason Momoa is set to play a villain in Fast X, he would follow in the footsteps of other action stars who've appeared in the series. Movie franchises often change their cast and characters to keep things fresh and interesting for audiences. If the filmmakers feel that a change is necessary for Momoa's character to work, they will probably make the adjustments to tell the best story possible. From Luke Evans in Fast and Furious 6 to Jaimin Hansu in Furious 7, Jason's the newest addition to the cast of the sagas, adding to the list of notable action stars who have appeared in the series. Momoa's character in Fast X will be a complex and interesting villain, with daddy issues and a sadistic streak. This type of villain could differ from the previous villains in the Fast and Furious franchise, who've been more similar to each other. Momoa's comments about his character suggest that he could be more akin to a Bond villain, which could bring a new dynamic to the series. For Momoa's character to reach his full potential, it will be important for the filmmakers to avoid repeating any mistakes that may have been made in previous installments of the franchise. Let's not forget the repetitive role. Cypher has played a significant role in the Fast and Furious franchise, appearing as the villain in both The Fate of the Furious and F9. It's unusual for a villain to return for 3 films in a row, especially if they haven't been redeemed like Hobbs. It's possible that the movie's producers feel Cypher is a strong and compelling character who adds depth and complexity to the story, or that they have more story to tell with the character. Without knowing more about the specific plans for the franchise, it's difficult to say for sure what the motivations behind Cypher's return might be. The Fast and Furious franchise has struggled with keeping Cypher relevant and new. Her role was pretty similar in Fast 9 and Fate of the Furious, which made it look pretty repetitive. To avoid this issue in Fast X, it could be helpful for the filmmakers to conclude Cypher's story and focus on the new villain played by Jason Momoa. It'll give audiences a chance to see a different type of villain. What's more, they can't just ignore her. Even though the role has become quite repetitive, it makes little sense to keep her around for every part. The producers would definitely want to avoid having Cypher as the main villain again in the next installment. It could be interesting to see the series introduce a new original villain for Fast X to add to the story. Having a recurring villain can also add depth to the series, so it's a balance that the filmmakers will have to strike. Ultimately, it will be up to the creative team behind Fast X to decide on the direction they want to take with the antagonist for the next film. The same thing happened with Jacob. His connection is somewhat limited to Jacob Toretto's role in F9 to Cypher. They may have wanted to give Jacob a larger role in the story, but Cypher's presence ended up overshadowing him. There's a possibility that the team made this decision intentionally and add more depth to Toretto's character arc. It's always difficult to know the exact reasoning behind the creative choices made in a film without being privy to the behind-the-scenes discussions and decision-making process. Finally, make or break. There are high expectations for the villain in Fast X if you believe the success of the film could hinge on the strength of Jason's character. The newest villain will either make the new movie or break it. The Fast and Furious series has had a mix of strong enemies throughout. It's always difficult to predict how a film will turn out based on early information. Everyone involved in the team will have to bring their A-game to deliver a satisfying conclusion to the series. Jason Momoa's comments have certainly generated excitement for his role in the movie, and we can't wait to see what the creative team has in store for the character. That's a wrap for this video. Are you excited to see Jason Momoa in a villain role? Let us know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.